Well, welcome to Modeling Time with me, Brian Banna. And in this video, we're going to work on the design for the fuel tank for the RS11. So let me get the camera set up. We'll get all going on it, and I'll explain to you what my plans are. All right, so the fuel tank, I was going to live with it, but I'm just not happy with that. And I thought, you know what? I've got a 3D printer. Let's see what we can do to make this look better. So I don't have to destroy this fuel tank, but what I do need to do is destroy the frame. Actually, no, I don't want to destroy the frame, but you know what I mean. I do need to cut the frame. I want to make the fuel tank the narrower fuel tank. And I don't know what the exact width of it is, but when I did a little test study, it looks like if I were to cut this piece off right here, this piece, all the way back to the bulk of the frame, the motor mount portion, that would give me the depth that I would need to put a full air reservoir underneath it. So the tank's pretty easy. It's just a big rectangle with some bolts on the sides. And so I can get that done easy. Cutting the frame, it will be really easy too. And I thought, oh man, I wonder if I can print up, because if I measure these protrusions that are supposed to represent bolts, they measure out to be about a 3-inch bolt. So I go, I wonder if I can do a 3-inch bolt. And I was able to do that. That's these right here. Let me zoom in on this. So that's a 3-inch hex head bolt. I like that. So on the fuel tank, I'm not going to mold these bolts onto the side of the fuel tank. I'll put a little dimple where they're supposed to be, and then I'll drill them out, and I'll insert these bolts. That way I know I've got a really crisp detail, and I don't have to worry about if the bolts stick out too far and they're not supported properly, and they get a little vague in the print. But like this, they came out beautiful. I mean, absolutely really sharp corners on the hex and all that. So I'll be using these, and I'll be just inserting them into holes. And I won't print the holes all the way through. I'll just put a dimple there so I can drill it, and I'll get a nice, crisp, clean hole for that. So if I cut this portion off and I redesign the rectangle so it's the same length as this tank, but it's as narrow to fit around this, the bulk of this weight here. And it'll fit right down up against the frame, just like this one does. So that'll be an easy fix. And what I'll do is I won't have the clips to clip it to the frame. I'll put holes in the bottom of the fuel tank so the bolts slip right through, and then I can just glue the fuel tank right to the frame. There's no need to ever take it off, so I'll just glue it to the frame. So I'll make it fit the frame properly, probably have it fit up against the bottom of this part of the weight, step it up, and have it fit into here, just make it fit right. Then, once that's done, then I will go back and I'll design the air reservoirs in a full circle. I might have to flatten the top a little bit to get them to fit up underneath the sill properly. But I do have a close-up of the bracketry and the ends of these tanks, because they're the same ones that were used on the RS3. So I have the detail for that. So I'm going to print these tanks standing vertical like this, so that I don't get any, hopefully won't get in any of the voxel lines. It'll take a little bit longer, but I think I'll get a really nice smooth print as it goes up. And I'm thinking of putting the bracket detail on this portion of the tank, and then printing this portion, the end cap, up to the bracket as a separate piece that fits into the tank, and then that way I get a better print out of the ends, because I can print that standing up also. I will get a little bit of voxel lines on the ends of the tank because of the curvature, but I can sand those out. There will be no detail on the ends, and what I'll do is I'll print out the pipe flanges and all that to fit into a hole that's in the end. So the least amount of detail that I can add to the tank makes finishing the tank better, because if I get any print lines on the tank, then I can just sand them out. What I could do is do this part of the tank, do the end cap part of the tank, and then do the straps as a separate piece, that the end caps and the middle of the tank get sandwiched. They sandwich the straps together. So I'm thinking of doing something like that, and then all of that will fit right up against the underside of the side sill. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really hoping it works out well. And as far as the plumbing goes, what's really cool, oh, I can't believe this. This is awesome. The company McMaster Car, in their catalog, they have a bolt heads. That's where I got these bolt heads from. They got bolt heads, they got pipe fittings, they got all kinds of stuff that come. You can download the SAT file. I can load that SAT file into my drawing program, and I don't have to make the drawing. It's already there. So McMaster Car, their SAT file, the parts are full scale, so I just scale them down to whatever I need. So that's what these are. So that worked out really, really well. I'm really glad somebody told me about the McMaster Car stuff, and it's really cool having the appropriate bolt heads and pipe fittings and all that. So it's time for me now to sit down at the table and draw up the fuel tank. All right. So I've done the design work for the fuel tank. Now, you see 3 iterations here. There should have only been 2, but when I finished the second iteration, I remember there's some other holes that I needed to put in it. So this is the first iteration. It was just to fit the tank onto the frame. So as you can see right now, the fit is really good. It doesn't move back and forth or side to side. It's really snug and tight. So I got that taken care of. Then I went to, well, actually, while this was printing, I cut the frame. So I went to iteration number 2, which was to drop the front and the back of the tank down so that these walls could go all the way up to the underside of the frame. Because with iteration number 1, the tank stopped. You can see the gap right here in the frame. So with iteration number 2, or edit number 2, I had to put the word front on the fuel tank so I knew which side was going. So on iteration number 2 here, yeah, you see the front, I put holes in the side for the bolts just to make sure those are working well. And you can see that the bottom is flat. There's no anything sticking up in it, so there will be in the next iteration. And this one fits nicely in there so that the tank goes right up against the frame. That's what I wanted. So with this one, I should have done other things, but that's okay, because realistically, getting this opening right was just, I got really lucky on the first run to get it to fit this. Now to do the frame, I'll go over the iteration number 3 in just a second. I want to go over the frame real quick here. So to take care of putting the narrower fuel tank on the frame, I had to cut this off here. See if we can see. There we go. I had to cut that off. I had to cut that off. This little T-shaped thing right up here, and the same for the other side. And I just barely, I took the end mill and I just barely touched. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. So I just barely touched this edge and then just cut it all down to the level of frame. And then after I got down to there, I realized, oh, I've got to make room for the air reservoirs. So you can see right here, this area here and here is cut lower to accommodate for where the air reservoir is going to be. So that was cut, and then I mentioned before this had to be cut off for the draft gearbox, this piece right here. So that was cut, and then I drilled and everything. So you can see all the cuts taking place on, here's the cut off piece and the drilled, there's the cut sides and everything. Oh, and the other thing I did, you can see this little slot right here and back here. So what I did was I put the fuel tank on. Oh, I put the fuel tank on, and then I scribed a line right across where this part sticks up, and then I just cut it even with the fuel tank, so now it's all nice and there's nothing sticking down below the frame. So now let's go to the final iteration, and then I'll show you the finished tank. So this is the final edit or iteration. So what I've done here is I put the step up in here to accommodate for this drop in the frame here. So now this fits really snug across there. I put the holes in it so that I can just drop the screw in and secure the motor without having to take the fuel tank off. So now I can actually glue this fuel tank to the frame if I want to, because there's no reason to ever take it off. I added a dimple, drill dimple for the fuel filler, and I added a drill dimple for the fuel gauge. So all these dimples here are for the bolts that go along the side. So that does that, and here is the finished fuel tank. So I got the bolts that I 3D printed. Those I drilled out the tank and then stuck those in. I like them much better than printing the bolts on the tank. I have a much sharper joint, or where the bolts and the washer touch the tank. It's a really sharp image, or sharp part. I can't think of what I'm trying to say. So anyway, you understand. And then this is a Cannon & Company fuel gauge from their fuel tank fitting kit, and this is a CalScale fuel filler. So now this fits real nicely right up there like that, and we have the fuel tank. So with the where's the there it is. So I've got the sill unit here, so that basically sits like that. I like it a lot. Now, I don't have the appropriate dimensions, like I said, for the width. I use the length of the Atlas tank, and but the width looks really good comparing it to photographs. I put some trucks underneath it to see how it compares to the photographs and the relationship of the tank to the brake calipers and stuff, and it looks really good. So I'm happy with it until I can get myself back to Illinois to the Railway Museum over by where I used to live, like an hour away from that. But they have a TP&W RS11 there that has this style tank on it. I'd like to get out there and measure it and do some more measurements. But until then, I think this will work out really well. Now, the cutting of the frame reduces the weight. The comparison between the two frames, I lose exactly 1/4 ounce. But I'm sorry, I lose a 1/2 ounce. But I did weigh the speaker setup. Adding the speaker back in, I gain a 1/4 ounce back. So total right now with the model, I've only lost a 1/4 ounce of weight. So I think that's a good goal. I was hoping not to lose much, but a 1/4 ounce, that's not too bad. So it'll still have the good weight that these models have. So that takes care of the tank. So later on, after I paint the frame and everything and the fuel tank, I'll get this glued on. I just have to put like a dab of glue in these parts and just stick this fuel tank on there, and it's there. So like I said, I never have to take this fuel tank off. There's no reason to. There's nothing mechanical that I have to get to, or electrical that's underneath the tank or anything. Everything's there. So that takes care of the fuel tank. I really like how this works. Now, I don't have the print, but I've got the prints, but I don't have a raw print. The way that I do this, because I print these with like if this was the build plate up here, they're printed upside down. And to do that, I don't want to booger up these curved radius bottom edges. So what I do, where the radius stops on the bottom of the tank, I projected or grew a 30 thousandths support plate underneath here. So when it's all done, I take everything off and it's all ugly up on the bottom here. So then I take a mill and I mill it down right to where the curvature stops, and it comes out perfectly. The holes are hidden until I cut all this off, and then the holes show themselves through. So I have a sacrificial layer that goes on here so that I can cut these tanks really, really smooth. So this tank has been grit blasted. I've sanded all the sides and got any imperfection. Well, there's no really imperfections, but I just sanded it to smoothen it out a little bit more, and then grit blasted it, and it really came out really nice. So that takes care of the fuel tank. Right now, my task is to design the air reservoirs. Okay, so that takes care of the fuel tank. I'm really happy with the way that it came out. I'm quite surprised that it came out as well as it is, but this 3D printer is really making my modeling life loads and loads of fun. The being able to design something and just turn around and have it done is great. So anyway, the tank's done, and I can move on to designing the air reservoirs. I have an idea of how I want to design it and piece it together. I think I talked about that a little bit already, but in the next video I'll go into more detail about what's going on with it. So thanks for watching, and I hope you'll stay with me on this build.